Good evening, punters, and welcome back to another episode of The Tripod, where we break down every NRL game every week from a betting perspective. If you joined us last week, you know we had a pretty good round, 12-4 on best bet, 75%. You're certainly happy if you have a round like that on the punt, and we're back again this week for round 18 with another 9 best bets. Jacob, how are you going? Round 18.
Fantastic. Thanks, mate. We've got a couple of things to announce. We were just talking before the pod about how NFL actually kicks off on Friday, Aussie time.
Snuck up on us.
This is crazy because you guys know we're massive sports fans. Rugby league's number one to us and in our hearts and in our wallet as well. But we do follow the American sports intensely. You know, we've put up some content around the NBA, which is on now, and it's going to be NFL as well. And we are going to do a weekly pod. It'll be a little bit different to what we've done. In the past, we've pretty much kept the identical format to this pod. So if people are interested in following us and trust our tips and we've done well, they can follow that same format. But I think just with time constraints, and you guys are probably just as busy as well, we're going to make it shorter and sharper and aim to just do like a 15-minute solo pod each week, one of us taking you through the best value we can find in the upcoming NFL. And that should be Saturday mornings, 11 a.m. Aussie East Coast time on the Tripod page and on YouTube.
Should definitely be up by 11 a.m, but make sure, like Jacob said, you're following the Tripod Facebook page and you've downloaded the Tripod app and you're following us on YouTube or either one of those, because that's where we'll release them, and you should be able to change your settings, hit the bell so you get a notification when we release that podcast.
And one more thing, mate, can I just freestyle
Go.
here? I meant to actually talk to you about this before we started recording live, but hey, I know you'll be on board anyway.
Go on.
We've talked to you guys about how awesome this year's been, but also that we're at a bit of a crossroads in our own lives about we love doing everything that we do, but it does take a lot of time, and whether we just have the ongoing hours and energy to keep doing this to the standard that we do, and we've tipped another incredible season in 2020. So this is something we've never really asked before, but we're in the market to maybe look at sponsorships for this pod. And if you're watching, and if you watch or listen every week and you're a fan, and if you've seen our engagement constantly grow, and you know the kind of people that like to listen or watch to us each week, maybe there's an opportunity if you own a business that you know creates a product for the kind of people that like to follow the pod, or you know somebody who does. I mean, reach out to us, because I think there is an opportunity to sponsor a segment or to have some naming rights. And you guys know that we never want to spam you. We're not going to do something that does the wrong thing by our listeners, but it's just an opportunity. I reckon it could be very worthwhile for some businesses out there.
Completely agree. Hit us up wherever you like. On the Tripod app or on the Tripod Facebook page is probably the best way to get in touch with us. Let's start with Thursday night, Jacob. It's the Tigers hosting the Rabbitohs. The Tigers are 7.5-point underdogs. The total sitting at 43.5 points. Not much personnel info for this one except for Gagai back for the Rabbits, which probably helps a little bit because Jackson Paulo has been absolutely horrific there on the wing, dropping a few sitters in recent weeks. Now, a lot of people will say, yeah, it could be a letdown spot for the Tigers after that, emotional and physically draining comeback win last week. But I don't think so, because after the Sharks lost last week, the Tigers have an outside chance of making the 8, and I definitely think that in that team, they think that they are a chance of making the 8, plus the fact that they play before the Sharks-Warriors game, so they're going to absolutely think they're still in the hunt for this Thursday game. In the Rabbits side, look, coming off a game where they'd be a little bit disappointed in that one. They had chances to score many a try in that one. Let that one go. Lost by 12 and lost by 6. Probably shouldn't have. But now they're kind of in an awkward spot, Jacob, where they can't really make the 4 and they're settled into the 8. They're not going to drop out of the 8. So I think the Tigers have more to play for in this one. I like them as the home dog.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think we could have a very entertaining game to kick off the round 18, because if you watched the Tigers last week, the way they've expanded their footy, they're happy to throw it around. While their season's still not over yet, they're just playing with a bit more freedom, because it's very unlikely, really, like they're going to make the 8, but they can enjoy their footy and see, what they can do. And the Rabbitohs scored 90-odd points in the previous 2 rounds and then only scored 16 last week. But let's remember the context. It was a very tight game against the Storm in the rain, and, they were playing their first game without Latrell. So I think overall they still look very dangerous with the ball, and they're in pretty good touch. You're right, they could be quite let down because it was a massive game to get up for. You have to get up for the Storm. It was a very close game. Whether or not they should have won, they definitely know that they could have won. So I can't be sure. I know they're better than the Tigers, but I can't be sure they're hungrier. Now, you talk about the Tigers. If they win, they pull within 2 points of the Sharks with 2 rounds to go after this. And we'll get to the Sharks. It's the final game of the round, but there is a possibility the Sharks don't win again this year with the players that are out and with quite a tough run home. So they will still feel they're alive. If you needed more explanation for that, I mean, Madge knows that Harry Grant is leaving at the end of the year, right? So does he start looking for next year? Does he start maybe giving Little a bit of time on the field as their future number 9? Well, last week, Little got 12 minutes. And Harry Grant didn't come off the field. He just moved him to lock when Little came on. So Madge is still gone balls to the wall. He wants to win the games too. So if he's got Harry Grant, he's going to bloody use every ounce or every milliliter of petrol that's in that tank, that's for sure. So let's jump on the Tigers here to throw everything they've got at the Rabbitohs in what could be an exciting Thursday night game.
And I should clarify, I said home dog, but this game is being played at Bankwest. Even so, we still like the Tigers. We've got 3 best bets on them for now. We're taking the Tigers plus 4.5 points in the first half. That's $1.82 on Sportsbet. We're taking a same-game multi on Sportsbet for the next 2 bets. The first one is the Tigers team total over 13.5 points and South's team total over 15.5 points. That's $1.88. And the next one is the Tigers plus 12.5 points and South's plus 13.5 points. That ends up being $1.80 as well.
And if you're wondering why we were looking if we could get Tigers plus 8.5. We couldn't, but you can get either team 1 to 12, which is like getting the Tigers plus 12.5. It just means they can't win by more than 13, which is, unlikely for a $3 dog to win by more than 13, but it happens. Then we just thought, let's just see if we can get even more sneaky, and for the identical price, you can catch 1 extra point with the Rabbitohs. So as unlikely as it is that the Tigers win this game by 13, if they're up 12 late and Benji Marshall gets his hands on the ball, you never know. One other point we should mention, Junior Totola is out as well. It's even more reason to think that the Tigers pack can match them and create a good contest.
But sometimes that's what it takes to get a winning bet. That took an extra 30 seconds for us, and we got 1 extra point on Souths for the handicap at the same price. Let's move on to Friday, the early game. The Dogs hosting Manly. The Dogs are plus 6 points. The total sitting at 42.5. 4 and out for this one, along with Dylan Napa. Plus, you get a bit of a backline reshuffle for the Dogs. Ockenbaugh's playing in this one, so that's exciting. I really think Dogs will be up for this one. You know how much I hate the Dogs, so for me to like this Dogs side, it needs to be a good spot, and I think it is a good spot. It's their second last home game of the year. The last one is against the Panthers, so kind of exactly what I said about the Cowboys last week, where, this is kind of what they think is their last winnable home game of the year. So I think they will be up for it, just like the Cowboys were last week. I can't say the same about this Sea Eagles side. I think it is a big letdown spot for Manly. They gave up 3 tries in the last 10 minutes to lose that one, and I just struggle to see, how they get up for this game against the Doggies. I think there's no doubt in my mind the Dogs will be up for this one. I like the Dogs.
You're right. There was quite a few changes for the Dogs, but the main one that I noticed is Avarillo getting moved to 6. And I look at all the best teams in the competition, the most successful ones, they've all got a running threat in the halves. And when you had kind of Foran and Lewis, you didn't have that. But Avarillo, who we've seen play several games in the outside backs, could be the spark there. Obviously, he's there because Foran is out. But because of the potential there, I don't see it as a big downgrade. And Watenis Lesniak shifting to centre, I think he can do a good job there, as you mentioned, Ockenbaugh into the wing. Look, for Manly, Cade Cust comes back into the team, although that bloke Schuster on debut did quite well, even though they lost the game. But this game is a bit like the previous one we just spoke about. Everyone can figure out who the better team is. But, I don't want to play a sub $1.50 favourite when I'm not sure they're desperate to win, and I'm just not sure what Manly's got to play for here. Sure, you can say pride, and you can say, they don't want to lose to the bottom side. They've got a better pack. They've got DCE. But I just can't be sure. That would have been a gut-wrenching loss last week at home. And for the Dogs, sure, they'd be disappointed to lose to the Titans, but they never led in that game, so I don't feel like it was heartbreaking. It's an opportunity to get off the bottom of the ladder. If they win, they will be, at least temporarily. Whereas if they lose, that might seal their fate, especially if then Brisbane was to go on and win. So I think it's quite simple that Dogs have a real chance to win this game, and we can actually get 6.5.
I agree. We've got a couple of best bets on the Bulldogs for now. We're taking the Bulldogs plus 6.5 points. You'll find that one at $1.82 on either Unibet or on Sportsbet in the other markets. And we're also going to take the Manly team total under 24.5 points. That's $1.80 on Bet365. Let's move on to the Friday night game. It's the Panthers hosting the Eels. The Panthers are 7.5 point favourites. The total sitting at 38.5 points. And everyone, obviously, that got on our Panthers minor premiership bet will be sweating this game, because if the Panthers get up in this one, you can basically run to the counter and cash that ticket. They're not going to lose their last 2 games in a row. Now, Eels have named Reid Marnie in this one, but early reports was he was going to be out for a couple of weeks. So it's one of those things where I don't think I can play the Eels in this one, not because I think that the line seems pretty fair to me, but also, Reid Marnie named with a chance that he's not going to play. That line might drift to 8 if he's named out. Plus the Panthers off the Thursday turnaround, whereas the Eels are off the Sunday game, so that's advantage to the Panthers. Both teams with something to play for here. Obviously, Eels, still want to remain in that top 4 spot. I don't think they're going to catch the Storm anymore now. Now, I think the Panthers win this game, but do I want to lay 7.5 points when I know that the Eels are going to be up for this one? Not necessarily, but I can't bring myself to play the Eels either.
So the Eels squad should be unchanged if Marnie does play. It was a funny one because it was originally announced he'd missed some weeks, and then it was announced actually the shoulder injury is not as severe and he's named to play. So we'll wait and see. For the Panthers, Isaiah Yeo comes back in the team. I heard this week that 30 out of 30 available first grade squad were at training this week. I mean, that is an incredible bill of health for this Panthers side. I also have seen people throwing around, predicted origin teams, and I can't remember who it was, if it was Gordy Tallis or it was a Queensland great.
Let's see, Gordon Tallis.
He picked Kurt Capewell in the Queensland team. Kurt Capewell can't make the Panthers 17 this week. So that really does show you how strong they are. Now, the big cliche that's being thrown around is, do you need to lose a game before the finals? Like, why would you need to lose? And I do see the argument, like, every week that this Panthers side wins, the confidence just grows. And if you want to win the comp, you've got to have supreme confidence. But the question is, would they possibly be overconfident? Like, what happens if they get into the finals and they find themselves down 10-0 to a Roosters or Storm? They've never been smacked in the mouth before. Like, do they panic, or do they know that to keep their cool and composure? Or are they up 4 late in a game in the finals and they don't play with the desperation to seal that win because they're just expecting to win? So I tell you what I do know. They're not definitely thinking that they're going to try and lose a game to do them any favours. They're definitely just going to keep riding this wave. Do they need motivation this week? Not really. I mean, you're at home. You're playing the side where this all began, the team that beat you. It was obviously 12 weeks ago. The Panthers were leading 10-0 against the Eels. The Eels scored like a 3-try blitz in about 10 or 15 minutes late in the game and won 16-10. That's the last time that the Panthers lost a game. So, and I also think, regardless of whether, a loss does them any good before the finals, this is your best finals rehearsal. So this is the game that they're going to, motivate themselves for, to play as well as they can, because this is the last chance you get to test yourself against, another elite side. I know there's lots of question marks about the Eels, but it's the best you get before potentially playing someone like the Roosters. Although I will ask you this question: who do the Panthers want to play in week 1 of the finals?
Probably the Eels.
Yep. Are the Roosters going to beat the Knights this week?
Yep.
So if the Panthers win this game, they will actually push the Eels down to 4th after the Roosters win. So that's in their benefit as well, to make sure they beat the Eels, to allow the Roosters to leapfrog, because I think it's no question they'd much rather play the Eels. Now, on the other hand, who do the Eels want to play in week 1 of the finals? Assuming they're going to finish either 3rd or 4th,
right.
Do they want to play the Panthers in Sydney or the Storm in Queensland? I don't think that there's a clear one's superior to the other. I think they're both challenging. Even if you think Penrith is the better team, you don't have to travel if you play that one. So what's really motivation for Eels? Because they snuck home last week and won, which I think is just enough to make sure their top 4 spot's not in jeopardy. But this is a game that's going to be very tough to win, and they're clearly not in form. So I don't want any part of Parramatta this week.
And that's why we do not have any best bets on the Friday night game. Let's move on to Saturday. It's the Dragons hosting the Raiders. The Dragons are 7.5 point underdogs. The total is 42.5. I'll just say straight off the bat, there's no way that I could play the Raiders in this one. It's just a horrible spot. Oh, sorry, the Dragons in this one. It's just a horrible spot for this Dragons side. It's now 2 gut-wrenching losses in a row, and this completely puts them out of contention for the 8. Meanwhile, the Raiders, coming off the 12-point loss to the Roosters, they were, less than impressive. They had some chances in that one. Now, a lot of people might say a bit of a letdown spot. I don't think so necessarily. They still want to finish like 5th or 6th, like you said, Jacob. It's better than finishing 7th or 8th. So I think the Raiders still want to win this game. But I've said in previous pods, when you're getting down the home stretch, and especially the game after, like, you're completely out, mathematically eliminated, and you have nothing to play for, generally, that's when the boys go out and try and have a little bit more fun, throw the ball around a little bit more. Your defense doesn't stiffen as much because, you're not fighting for, every play because you're out of the hunt. And I think that's probably what's going to happen to this Dragons side. They're going to throw it around a little bit more, have some fun over the last 3 weeks of the season. So I like the overs in this one, especially because not only that fact, but also the Dragons' stats a little bit suppressed from last week where they butchered a few chances and obviously playing against a stout Roosters D.
The Raiders stats, you mean?
Raiders stats. What did I say?
Yeah. Dragons. I think you're mixing them up. But yeah, we don't like either. You said you don't like the Dragons. We should mention they get back Paul Vaughan, but you're right. Like, you'd never usually like to play a team off a heartbreaking loss. But I don't really want to be on the Raiders this week because I think last week was their grand final. Like, and I explained everything last week about how it was at home. It's against their hated Roosters, the team that cruelly beat them last year. And it was so much at stake. It was a chance to get into the 4, which they know is the pathway to have an amazing year again against the odds. Now, it's like, no matter what, it's a long way around the mountain. And I don't want to doubt the toughness of this Raiders squad because I've seen them rebound from tough losses before this season, but it's still not an ideal spot. Speaking of tough losses, obviously, like, you're losing in Golden Point to the Cows, that game anyone could have won. Is there extra disappointment there for Dean Young, who's coaching this team, but it's been named this week that he's not going to be the future head coach? I just feel like the Dragons would be happy for this season to end, even though, like, with Vaughan back, it's not the worst 1-13. Like, and there's still, like, especially with the emergence of some of the guys in the outside backs we've talked about, the likes of Lomax and Dufty. There is still a bit of talent, and maybe if they play with a bit of flair, especially being a Saturday afternoon game, then they could put on some points. Just going to specifically talk about one player, Jordan Rapana. You got to remember, he left the Raiders and got a contract in Japanese rugby. Now, with COVID, the competition got cancelled. He called the Raiders and said, "Do you want me back by any chance?" They said, yeah. He came back, played interchange. Simonson was out for the season, so he played wing. Nickel Clockstad got injured. He filled in at fullback. Now Curtis Scott is injured. He's playing centre. Like, he used to have explosive pace and legitimately be maybe the best winger in the comp. He doesn't have that, but what a player he is. Just, like, it's a sensational club, man, and maybe he gets a meat pie this week because I'm with you. I like overs.
We do like the overs. We've got a couple of best bets on that. We are taking over 7.5 tries for the game at plus money, $2.05 on Ladbrokes and on Neds. And we're going to take the second half total over 21.5 points. That is $1.84 on Unibet.
And 4 games down.
Yep.
Let's just address the elephant in the room as well.
Go.
No bet easy.
Yeah, I know.
RIP. So you guys know that we try and give you guys the best bets across the main Aussie bookies. And our job got a little bit harder this week in the sense of one less place to shop around. That, as you probably have heard, they've merged with Sportsbet. So we'll keep our eyes open if there's any other really rock solid bookies that we trust enough that aren't so shady that we would recommend. But for now, less competition is never a good thing. But we'll still battle on them. The plays we're giving out this week are still pretty good plays, I believe.
Less competition's never a good thing. I guess some people will argue, there's like 30 bookies out there. But honestly, the horror stories that you've heard from some of those smaller bookies, like, that's the thing. Like, you try and...
Not just heard, but experienced.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to the Titans hosting the Broncos, the Queensland Derby. The Titans are laying 2.5 points, the total, sitting at 44.5 points. Look, I was split on this game, but Jacob, you've twisted my arm and you've made some very good arguments. But look, the thing with this one is, it's funny. At the start of the season, could you ever have imagined that the Titans would have been the public side playing the Broncos? But that's what we get here. I guarantee you, the public doesn't want to touch the Broncos, and they're going to be all over the Titans in this one. And look, from a pure, power ratings, I guess, mathematical standpoint, yes, the Titans are probably the slightly better team and they're at home. They should be rightly favoured in this one. But there is a couple of reasons you could like the Broncos, and it's because, firstly, there's the revenge factor. They got crushed by this Titans side earlier in the season by 18 points, and this Broncos side does not in any way, shape or form want to have the season from hell and finish with the wooden spoon here. So I could argue that this Broncos side has more motivation coming into this one than the Titans. They get back Alex Glenn. And when you look at, it's funny, when you look at these teams on paper, this Broncos side is solid. It's still a very good team. So I think they're going to be up for this one. And that's all you can hope, because honestly, the reason people have been losing on the Broncos and the Broncos have been shit this year is the effort. And I really think that, if out of all games down the stretch here, this should be the one where you get a rock-solid effort from this Broncos side.
Well, yeah, it's their grand final. So you talk about they got beat by 18 at Suncorp earlier this year. That was one of their low points. I think they're gonna equal or create the longest losing streak in Brisbane Broncos history if they lose this game. Already on a very long losing streak, as we know. So That's certainly huge motivation. What about the revenge for raiding David Fafita? That's got to hurt as well. So I know I'm getting an effort. And you touched on something else. So Alex Glenn's back, Offengawi back on the bench, Coates on the bench. They lose Jordan Ricky for Titans, getting in Hipgrave and lose Kelly. And both are more in the centres is a little bit of a worry. He's a young player with talent, but not his natural position. But let's touch on Alex Glenn. He was named captain of the Broncos this year, which is a huge honour to be the captain of one of the big premier sporting franchises in Australia. And this has been the most horrible year in the history of the club, as we said. And most of those factors are outside of his control. We know a lot's been made of Seabold. We know one player can't do everything. And on top of that, he's missed a lot of games with injury. But if his teammates have any respect for him, they have to just treat this week with complete and utter focus in their preparation and complete and utter desperation in their play this week. And whether they do win, which is certainly no guarantee, but they have to throw everything out there. And on top of that, I could argue the best three players that will take the field are Katoni Staggs, Payne Haas, and David Fafita. They're all on the side that I think is more desperate. Although I've already told you guys, AJ Brimson is putting together a hell of a year. Still, Brisbane's got the talent to win this game. I kind of like the spot for them. They got an encouraging performance against Penrith that actually could have kind of springboarded this week to give them a little bit of hope and confidence, because they held their own for most of that game. And they get the longer turnaround. They played on the Friday in Brisbane, so there's really no travel factor, whereas, the Titans had to go down to Sydney. Now, if it's a big game for Brisbane, it is still a big game for the Titans. Wouldn't they love to keep shoveling it on the big brother who, you've got to remember, has bullied them pretty much ever since the club was founded? So I'm not saying they're going to be lacking motivation, and I don't want to take away a lot from the Titans. It's just simply the fact that this is just the home run kitchen sink game for Brisbane. And look, I'll be completely honest, I think the bookies are onto this, and we're not getting a great deal of line value. I think the Titans are the better team and at home. But I just think that all these other circumstances mitigate that. I really believe Brisbane's going to win this game. So, of course, I'm going to take them with the start.
And we have two best bets on the Broncos. We're making ourselves a mechanical Broncos plus 4 points. It ends up being $1.88. 56% of your stake on the Broncos plus 4.5 points, $1.78 on Unibet. And the remaining 44% stake on the Broncos plus 2.5 points at $2 on Ladbrokes and Neds. The second best bet will be the Broncos plus half a try. That is $1.95 on Bet365. Let's move on to the Saturday night game. It's the Roosters. Oh my God, I've got Raiders written up there from last week. It's the Roosters laying 19.5 points, hosting the Knights, and the total is 46.5 points. Now, for the Knights, you obviously read Ponga, Barnett, Heimel, Hunt, all rested for this one, and I think it gives you an insight into their motivation. Look, they've got the draw up their sleeve from earlier on in the season. They're safe in the top 8. They can't make the top 4. So the Knights are resting up until the finals pretty much. In saying that, it's not necessarily that the Roosters are going to blow them out in this one. The line is 19.5 points. And the guys that are playing for the Knights are still going to put in. So, look, I'm not laying close to 20 when I think I'm probably going to get a decent performance out of the remaining Knights players. But at the same time, this is arguably the best team of this century in this Roosters side, so I don't want to take the points either.
It reminds me a bit of when the Knights had to come up to Sunny Coast and play the Storm, and the Knights were a little bit undermanned. And like, we respect the Knights. We know they're tougher this year under O'Brien. We know that they're not going to play anybody and roll over. But we really just had no faith that they could win. And I think that game, the line was, 14, although shifted around between 10 and 14. But ultimately, I think they did play reasonably tough and did lose by about 14. And that's what this game could be. It's like the players that are picked will try hard. And look, personally, I will say, I think it's a very wise move. People might argue, well, Ponga's on that kind of money. Like, why should he get rested? But if you watch them play the Sharks, I talked about this in the recap, the Sharks were so physical, not just the one Townsend hit, but the whole game. He played with a broken nose, which, wouldn't be that fun to recover from. Not that that's keeping him out, but just that you're right. Like, what, and I think what people don't
down the home
understand
stretch,
as well,
I always think health over chemistry. It trumps it all the time.
And you know what else? It's like they could play their strongest possible 17 this week. They could fight tooth and nail. It still probably won't win.
Right.
And then all you've done is sapped more energy out of these guys. So I love the idea because it comes back to like, what is a successful year for the Knights this year? Some will say making the 8 is successful, and fine, but I think that's a bit kind because this roster, we picked them to make the 8. I think at least winning a finals game, and I think that's what the focus has to be. And I think you don't achieve too much with a small percentage chance of an upset this week compared to, looking ahead. So I think the move is justified. For the Roosters, they just seem to be warming up, and they do want to keep winning because I think they even see an opportunity to overtake the Eels and just keep rolling towards the finals and getting stronger each week with players that can come back into the team. Sonny Bill, so much hype about him, did nothing last week,
right.
Maybe gets a little bit more game time this week. The funny thing is, though, Sonny Bill, like, he's just that larger-than-life kind of character. You can't take your eyes off him, and I think there's something to be said for the opponent that when he's out there, they're all staring at him, and it might take attention off some other superstar Rooster players. So I think he is adding to this team, even if it's not seen in the stat sheet. In saying that, not going to lay close to 20 points.
So that's a pass for us for the Saturday game. Let's move on to the second highest line of the round. It's the Storm laying 18.5 points, hosting the Cowboys. Total is a high 46.5 points. Now, Pappenhausen out for the Storm in this one, but Nico Hines has been a decent replacement for them. And look, I said last week with this Cowboys side, it's arguably the best game, the best spot of the entire season to take that Cowboys side, last winnable game at home, and they showed up. They showed up in a big way, get the emotional win, by 1 point, and I would argue that this might be the worst spot of the season to take the Cowboys. Massive letdown. You win as an underdog at home, emotional, 85-minute game, and now you have to come in as a nearly 20-point underdog and play the Storm. It's just a horrific spot for this Cowboys side to be in. Now, I would lean towards the Storm in this one, but it's really tough for me to take over 3 converted tries, so I'm going to pass it.
And on top of the points you made, it is not quite a full strength Storm. As you say, like, that's concerning, an Achilles injury to Pappenhausen. We don't know the severity, but Brandon Smith's still out. Dal Finucane's still out. I know Nelson comes back, but off the top of my head, there's maybe one other. Christian Welsh is also suspended. So they're not at full strength. And maybe if they were, you'd expect them to just be ruthless and win this game 20 plus. And maybe they still will. But, like the Cowboys, while I'm not expecting a huge performance, I definitely don't think they can win. You've kind of laid the reasons out why they could underperform. Maybe they get some confidence from that one too. Like, it's a youngish group that maybe, get something out of that close win theory too. So we'll probably just have to pass this game again because we don't trust the Cowboys enough to take the points, but it's too much to lay with a Storm side that's, 90% strength.
Indeed, and let's move on to the final game of the round. It is the Sharkies hosting the Warriors. The Sharks are laying 4.5 points. The total is 43.5. A lot of people will be watching this game with a lot of intent, having bet on the Warriors. I've seen a lot of bets on the Warriors in the last few days to make the 8, and obviously they have to win this game if they're any chance of doing that. I think it's no hope, honestly, and I would take the Sharks in this one. I think they're the much better team than the Warriors. I know you've been a little bit down on the Sharks this year, Jacob, and look, the Sharks aren't coming in full strength. You get Sean Johnson back, but you're missing Chad Townsend. But plus, you get Sione Katoa back, who has just been a try-scoring machine for this team. I think they're the better team, and honestly, the Warriors have put in every single week lately, and they've been cashing tickets for punters that have been betting on them. So I have no doubt that, your average Joe is going to continue to bet on this Warriors side, but I think they've got to be a little bit deflated in this one. They proceeded to watch the Sharks lose last week and think, oh my God, if we put in a really good showing against the Eels and win this one, we are a fucking solid shot of making the 8. And they did exactly that. They put in a great performance, but they've got to think to themselves, we got fucking screwed with the sin bin, 2 tries, and I think it's got to be a little bit deflating because although mathematically they can still make the 8, I think really in their hearts they know that last week was the week that they had to win. You get the Sharks with a couple of extra days prep here, so I really do think that the Sharks would cover this 4.5 line.
And I know, I also see a lot of good reasons to like the Sharks in this one because it's a gut punch on a Sunday game to go so close but fall short when they would have pulled within 2 points of the Sharks. So just to lay it out, they're 4 points behind the Sharks.
Right.
There's 3 rounds to go, but they've got the far lesser points differential as well. So there's really only one scenario they make the finals. They win all 3, obviously this one and the next 2, and they play the Raiders and the Seagulls. So you can say that there won't be favourites in those games, but they're still winnable. And you don't know what the Raiders will do with key players like Papali before finals and stuff. So it's possible, sure.
And the Sharks have a tough run.
The Sharks have to lose out. Now the Sharks play the Roosters next week and then close the season with the Raiders. So it's possible. So I think New Zealand still can cling to that hope, and they've just been playing with great spirit. In the camp, it's been a phenomenal year. There's been games where you thought might be a letdown spot, and they've lifted. And if there is a small boost to the squad, Jennings and Alvaro didn't play against Para because that's who that had loaned them out, but they'll both rejoin this squad. Sean Johnson back into the Sharks, and they get the longer turnaround. And they want to win this game just to take that heat off and secure their spot. But a guy you didn't mention, Wade Graham, is out for the Sharks. And I actually said to you, I'd be with you on the Sharks if Wade Graham was playing. This line is, 4.5 in places. If he was playing, I reckon you'd still maybe be able to lay 5.5, but it's a very similar bet. But Wade Graham is so important to this back row of this side, not just, as a player, but also as a leader. And I just look these sides up and down. I don't really see that necessarily that the Sharks are much superior to New Zealand. I look at a guy like RTS, who's just phenomenal every week. And even Sean Johnson has been named before and then turned out to not play. So I don't have that same confidence on the Sharks. Not overly confident in New Zealand, but I take a side bet against you. I don't think we have any 60% plays that we can find in this game, which is kind of annoying. I will say from a neutral standpoint, you want New Zealand to win
I would
to
love
keep the
to
story
see
alive,
the Warriors
and just
make
to keep the top 8 a bit more interesting for the final 2 weeks.
They deserve to, honestly. They've had every bit of shit thrown at them this season. Everything's gone wrong, and for them to make the 8 would be an absolute Cinderella story. Unfortunately, I just don't think it's going to happen for them starting with this round. But yes, I'll take a $200 side bet with you. I'll take the Sharks minus 4.5 points. Jacob, that's our first side bet in 3 weeks, I think. You've been a little bit scared.
No, we had 2 last week.
Not last week. We had none last week, I don't think.
I laid -6 with the Roosters,
but
you're
right, you're right. Yep.
I also laid points with Penrith. We were 1-1, mate.
1-1. All right. That's going to wrap it, guys, for round 18. Only 3 more weeks left, and we are still over 60%, which was our aim at the start of the season. Not that we thought that was going to be achievable, but it's looking very much so leading into the finals now. Thanks once again for tuning in. Make sure you download the Tripod app and follow the Tripod Facebook group and page on Facebook to get our NFL pod when it releases. And we're going to have that, like Jacob said, Saturday morning. So thanks again for tuning in, guys. See you on Sunday night to break down round 18.
Potential sponsors holler at us. Another thing I'm going to start saying at the end of every pod, because we mean it and we have a lot of information that's available for you guys, is please gamble responsibly. That should always go without saying, but I want to add it. We've got it in the text, but let's say it as well. But let's sign off with Lego.
Lego.